Hi there, and welcome to another episode of the Rabid Dog House, where we like to discuss lost or forgotten horror gems with a little bit of bite. I'm your host, Justin Steele, and tonight we are going to discuss 2000's Urban Legends Final Cut, directed by John Ottman and starring Jennifer Morrison, Matthew Davis, Hart Bachner, and Loreta Devine. Also known as Urban Legends 2, this sequel to 1998's hit Urban Legend follows a new group of college students, this time in film school, as one of them decides to do her thesis on urban legends. Unfortunately, a mass killer is trying to bring her thematic ideas to life. From stolen kidneys to no one being able to hear you scream, these students need to unmask the killer before they are next on the list. Luckily, a familiar face or two from the original might show up to help. Urban Legends Final Cut continues on these slasher elements from the original, while leaning more towards a comedic thriller slant with a little Hitchcock thrown in. This sequel is definitely for the horror fan that enjoys a late 90s feel with some meta elements, some intended laughs, and an overall fun and thrilling ride. Also joining me tonight is my fabulous co-host, Zena Dixon. And thanks again for joining us for another episode of the Rabid Dog House. And thank you, Zena Dixon, the real queen of horror, for joining me tonight. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, Justin. How are you?
I'm doing really well. And of course, super excited to talk about Urban Legends 2, or Urban Legends Final Cut, if you will. A movie that you and I have referenced in the past and just, I think we both love, enjoy, and I think we're just going to go ahead and do spoilers right off the bat.
Yes.
Now, I'll say just the way that I came into it, I did not get to see the original in theaters, and that was of my time, the Scream generation of movies. I Know What You Did Last Summer, and so, like, I was bummed that I didn't get to see it in the theater, and I did really, really enjoy the original. So when the second one came about, I was like, there's no way I'm missing it. Now, the original wasn't like my favorite of that generation, but I really did enjoy it. And the second one of the main things that I loved about it was something that I usually don't care for when it's a franchise or sequels, which is you are 100% able to follow this new cast, a new story, a new set of characters, settings, everything, and still enjoy it immensely. And in some ways, I might enjoy it better than the original. I certainly love that you do have certain links, like Loreta Devine's character of Reese, or the sort of, wink, wink, nudge moment of Rebecca Gayheart at the end of the film with the sort of Alfred Hitchcock music playing. But I just loved it. I remember seeing it in the theater and sitting there just being so happy the whole time, thrilled, excited, and just pleasantly surprised. I think it's a solid cast. I think that there's some really great sequences in it. I think that it requires you to have a little bit of suspension, it requires you to suspend your disbelief, but not so far over the line. Like you're enjoying it so much that you're willing to suspend that disbelief, and you're almost able to kind of think like, well, maybe this could happen. Probably not, but maybe, and I
Right.
just I think it's really smart. The whole the meta aspects of like film students, going through the sort of Alfred Hitchcock references. I was not, I didn't know who Dario Argento was at the time, but now watching back, I feel like there's a definite influence, like with the whole kidney scene,
Yes.
from Inferno, but like the decapitation, it's just set up the same way. So it clearly has all this sort of homages and love for it. But those are my initial, just coming into it. I loved the movie. It stuck with me throughout the years. It came out on Blu-ray a couple years ago. I had to have it. And it's just, for me, a bunch of fun. Fun, fun, fun. But Zena, how did you first come into it? What were your initial thoughts? What did you think of like the original comparatively, and etc.?
So I watched the first one first, and I really, really love the first one. But kind of like you, it's kind of up against some other really like awesome slashers. So sometimes it gets lost in the cracks. But it's still an
Absolutely.
awesome movie. Minus Natalie. I'm not gonna lie, which we discussed the
Yeah, I
final
remember that.
girl.
Yes, yes.
she's
It's
not
same.
she's not my favorite, but So going into this one, I'm not gonna lie, I was not really expecting a lot, and I think I was like 12 or 13, I don't remember. And I was like,
Oh,
and
wow.
I think that my mom rented it, so we watched it, and I loved it. I love the fact that it takes place at a film school. That is
Yes.
just, it's so much fun. And like there's a, okay, we'll get to this, but the killer, his whole, this person's whole reasoning, it's a bit far-fetched. Like, settle down, you know? But it works. You know what I mean? It works. And it's
Yeah.
just like, I felt like, okay, even though I liked the first one, there's just something about this second one that I kind of prefer it over the
Yeah.
first one.
Yeah.
You know, like the kills are so much more just brutal, you know, and just blunt. And then even with the characters, we don't really get to know them too much, but you like them. Like you
Yes.
like them a lot. Even when it comes with the main girl, Amy. I like Amy. I do. I think that she's super nosy and kind of there's something that she does that's like kind of like, hey, that's kind of selfish and terrible. But I get it, you know, because life must go on, you know? So I don't know, like I love the fact that we see familiar faces, you know, not just only with characters that we've seen in the previous ones, but you know, even with these the actresses that we've seen or actors that we've seen in previous horror movies and even non-horror movies, you know, like it's just exciting. I kind of wish though, um it's like, okay, I'm not gonna lie, I didn't see the ending coming, like with the killer. I didn't suspect it, like when I first watched it. So even when I rewatch it, I'm trying to see, you get nothing. You get nothing. Like, so it's just, at least for me, I didn't receive anything from it, any types of hints. So I don't know. It's just, I love the fact that it takes place at this, you know, film school, and you can tell that it's like a real fancy film school. Okay, not
Right.
just anybody can get into that school, even with their project alone, and the fact that these students have a chance at Hollywood. You know, like this could be the start of something. So yeah, stakes are high. People would kill for something like that, you know? So, but
Yeah.
no, I feel like it's just, it's great. I love the acting. Again, like a lot of standout characters, but I really like Amy. Like I like
Yeah.
her a lot. I like Amy, and of course Reese, she's everything. You know,
Everything.
she's everything. And we previously talked about this, and even on my own channel, I did a video on, like, you know, black final girls, you know, and Reese is a final girl. Okay, so it's just, and I
Absolutely.
feel like sometimes people forget that too, you know. You know,
Absolutely.
I can keep going, but that's pretty much my whole thoughts on that.
Well, I don't, I want to devote a chunk of this video talking about Loretta Devine because I think that she makes this video, but I'm going to put a pin in that because I want it just a little bit later. But just commenting to what you said about how a lot of people forget that, I was rewatching the special features, and even Loretta Devine herself forgets that. She was saying in it because it was filmed maybe like 2 years ago, this little special feature, but she was like, all this stuff is having like a franchise or sequels or reboots. She's like, why didn't I get that? She's like, I did get that. I got that with Urban Legends Final Cut, and I forgot. And it just cracked me up because like she's just, her comedic skills are amazing. Okay, maybe we will talk a little about. No, we're gonna pause to talk about
Okay.
Loretta Devine because I don't forget. Her comedic skills are amazing. Not to mention that she's just super talented. The I do want to go, and I think maybe we'll start backwards where you mentioned the killer, and I
Mhm.
do feel like the killer's reveal, which I also did not see coming.
Mhm.
I feel like everything makes sense. The whole movie holds up, but like the killer's motivation, like you said, is on the line of believable. Like everything in this movie, I feel like
Right.
is that line of, is it believable? Yeah, it is. Is it likely? No. But I think that's the best part of this movie is that it's like hung together, or everything, the scenes, the killer's motivations, everything is like stringed together with like scotch tape and paper clips. Like it's barely together, but it does hold up. And yeah, the characters, you don't get to know much about them. Now, I thought about this recently, and I still have more thoughts, but I'm going to ask you a direct question here. Is I just was kind of reflecting on horror in general and why I might not respond to certain newer contemporary stuff. But back then, because I was thinking about it, like I do like Amy a lot. I think she's the quintessential girl next door. I think she's, got that quality about her, but she also does some stuff that's, wait, what?
Yeah.
How do you think, like, because we were younger at the time, that just in horror in general, like the weight of character development, does it become more important as we grow older, become critics ourselves, that like we do seek character development? Because I certainly do love and appreciate that in film. And I feel like it's sort of like the bat I have to knock away criticism. Why do you love horror? I'm like, there's some really great characters in it.
Right.
But watching it when you're younger, do you think like that really matters at all, the character development, or you just kind of like you just don't want them to die? Like that's enough. That these are
Well,
people.
that's a really good question. I think it's kind of both, because you kind of want the characters to be likable, and you kind of don't, obviously you don't want them to die.
Yeah.
So I feel like that could be a drag, but sometimes it's like because if you like the characters, then you have sympathy, you're compassionate for them. So even with these characters, even using this one as an example, as we said this, we like Amy, even though yes, there's some stuff that she does that's a little bit off, but overall we like her. No offense, when I think about Natalie as an example, I kind of didn't want her to be alive. And I know
For
that's,
sure. No, and that's
yeah,
in line with it. Like when people are like, "Oh, these are just meant to be killed," or "Who cared? We
right,
wanted them to die." Like
right.
that's yeah, definitely that's
And
a great
I just found
example.
myself rooting for, what was her name?
In the Rebecca Garrett's character, Brenda.
Yes,
Yeah,
Brenda. Thank you. I was gonna call her
sure, for
Rebecca, but
sure.
no, I found myself kind of rooting for her. I mean, it
Yeah,
was understandable. Like you kind of ruined her life.
kind of. Yeah,
So, and then on top of that, then she was just so boring and bland, and it's just like everybody around her, they were like, I just didn't find her likable. She was
yeah.
kind of snob. So, but I agree with you. Like when you're younger, is that important? I think so, because I didn't know quite what that was. But there were characters, even sometimes if you don't like them, but there's just something about them. They could be
Interesting.
entertaining. Like I think about even Sleepaway Camp. Judy.
Mm,
Judy was awful, she
yeah,
was terrible.
yeah.
But
The
I don't
word.
know. I was entertained by her, and I was kind of bummed when
Yes, yes.
she got burned to death. So, you know what I mean? So
I
I
do. And
think it
that's what I'm saying is
depends.
I don't think there's a definitive answer, but I was just curious your perspective on this. I was like, there isn't that great of character development, but at that age I was just like, I don't want them to die. But then
True.
in retrospect, I'm like, now I almost require it for a horror movie. Not always, but mostly I want some good character development. But in this case, I'm
Yeah.
just willing to forgive it. So I was just curious about that.
Definitely.
Let me ask you though about, okay, so with the killer though, still on sort of that topic, I do like what Urban Legends Final Cut does with the killer in terms of, I think, Hart Bachner or Brockner, I think it's Hart Bachner. I feel like, yes, it's again a thin motivation, but I believe it. I believe what he does. I think he does a great job with the sort of, the climax of the film. But I think that there's like, the whole Trevor Travis thing or the character Toby. I think that like this movie does have enough other who done or who enough other suspects to create a sort of who done it atmosphere to the whole movie, and I thought that they did a really good job with that. And I like that like the handling of the urban legends in this one is different than the first one, like where you have Brenda and you are sort of rooting for her, but the way like the urban legends play out in that movie is different, and it almost becomes a part of the fabric of their lives, whereas in this one the urban legend from the original is now an urban legend, or the story of the original is an like with Reese when she's like talking about like, I've got a story for you. I like that the two movies have a similar feel theme, but like when you stop to think for a minute, they're actually very different,
Right.
and yet they there's a cohesiveness to them. But what did you think about, like, did you, because you said you couldn't pinpoint in retrospect going back who the killer was, but like what did you think about like the sort of suspects of the film, Brenda versus this killer, as well as Travis, Toby, if you will, or Travis, Trevor, Toby, etc.
Right. Well, I think, okay, with the first one, I don't remember if I thought it was Brenda or not, like when I first watched it. But when you rewatch the first one, you can kind of see, because there's sometimes she's not around, you know?
Sure. And
And it
to be
was just,
clear, I didn't guess on either of them either, just
right,
to
right.
clarify.
Okay. And so, but then it's just kind of like rewatching this one, because I knew for sure, because this one was more recent, Kind of, you know what I mean. I remember watching it because I loved it that much, and I didn't see it coming at first. Honestly, I thought it was that guy who they would always, he was the blonde that everybody was always bossing
Right,
around,
right.
because they made it seem
It's like
like it was going to
Piper
be.
at the end, yeah.
Yeah, they made it seem like it was going to be him, but then I thought, okay, well, I wonder if this time if it's going to be Reese, because
Oh,
at
sure,
this
sure.
point, yeah, like you can get away with it. Why not? And maybe she's still upset with what happened. But then it's like, no, because there was times when she would just be right there.
Yeah.
So, but I don't know. I kept on going back and forth, and then I even thought that maybe it could be the rich guy because he's rich.
Oh yeah, Matthew Lawrence's character. Yeah, he
Yeah.
definitely throughout the whole film, even during the climax, until the moment of reveal, you're sort of like, what's he doing? What's he
Yeah.
watching? Here he
Like,
goes.
and then he's naturally just an a-hole, so it's just like,
Sure, for sure.
he's probably sneaking around. But no, like, I couldn't guess it, and I think that's one of the things that attracted me to it. Even going back and rewatching it, it's just, no matter how many times I watch it, I can always watch it again, because it always feels
Yeah.
so fresh. It feels so new, like as if I'm not trying to sound cheesy, but as if I'm watching it for the first time. You know what I mean?
I 100% do. I think like one thing I love about it, and you kind of touched on this with, Jennifer Morrison as Amy. One thing I really do like about it is at that time, there was what I call like the Joey Potter theme, which from Dawson's Creek, played by Katie Holmes. Joey Potter was the girl next door, but she was, poor. She had to
Mhm.
struggle to get to like, the next step to get to college, to get a career. And that was like always her theme. And I feel like there were a lot of movies or TV shows at that time that sort of followed that theme. I really liked in Urban Legends Final Cut that, the character of Amy, it's sort of the inversion of that. Like she comes from, a so-called someplace. She has money. She had, or, I mean, I don't know that she has a lot of money, but clearly she can afford this university. And you have to think with her father being an Oscar award winner, she's got some money. And
Right.
so I liked that it was sort of like because of Jennifer Morrison's performance, you could still prove that you can identify with a character that wasn't necessarily a Joey Potter. The other example coming to my mind is Teaching Mrs. Tingle with Katie Holmes, who also has that sort of like
Yeah.
poor, needs the scholarship. And I really like that you can still root for a character, like because of her performance, Amy, you can root for her because she has something different to prove.
Mhm.
And it's a little bit of a, like, just say what you were saying, it's fresh. Even in this case, of a sort of theme that was becoming, overplayed in the late 90s, early 2000s, it was another take on somebody that, maybe kind of has it all, but you still want them to win. And
Right.
I thought that was a really like strong part of the film. But overall, what did you think about like all the other cast characters and Amy's performance too in general?
Well, first, I love teaching Mrs. Tingle.
Oh, me too. Yes.
Oh my God,
Yes.
so
Oh, yeah.
good.
I
Such a
saw
good
that in
movie.
the theater too. In fact, that's one of my
Oh.
favorite horror movie soundtracks. It has these two songs by Bree Sharp that I love. But anyway,
Well, with the characters, I love the characters. I love that they're
yeah.
diverse. It's like they still kind of go traditional, but they add like, oh, it just feels real. The only thing is, with Anthony Anderson's character and the other guy who he hangs out with, I'm sorry, Dirk, was it Dirk? I don't remember their names at the moment, but you know who the two I'm talking about.
Yes. Yeah. The sort of
Um,
sci-fi guys, like the
yeah,
crew.
yeah. I thought that they were kind of weird. Because sometimes you could see where it's like, oh yeah, they're the horror guys. They know about horror. They know about genre stuff.
Yeah.
Cool. But then, oh, let's go watch her, change, or watch her take off her makeup, and it's just kind of like, I don't know. I don't know if it was supposed to be like a comedic relief.
Right. Right.
It was cool. We needed that though. But yeah, the characters. I love, again, going back to that. I love Amy. I think that Amy's, nice, and you kind of even said that, where it's just like she just so happens to be rich and she actually doesn't need certain things, but she wants to do it on her own. It's kind of
Yes.
beautiful. And then I'm so sorry that I'm not remembering names at the moment. Is it Vanessa?
The one played by Eva Mendes, or
Yes.
yeah.
With her, I really like her character. I think that she just seems fun, and
Yeah.
she really did seem like she cared about Amy, which is which was nice. Of course, we have to talk about Loretta Devine character. We have to talk about
For
Reese
sure.
because she's a powerful woman. I love it when she's in her little security office dancing around.
Oh, that's the best.
Like, it's just so cute. And
With
or
Jessica
who else?
Caulfield from Valentine.
Yes. Oh,
Yeah.
you know what, Sandra? I liked her. I liked her. I was kind of sad that that
I
happened to her.
love Sandra. I loved her as Lily in Valentine, and I loved her as Sandra in Urban Legends Final Cut.
I think that's how we started talking about Urban
I
Legends
think so
because
too. I think so too.
such a good time. But no, I feel like it's just again, it's just a diverse cast that works. Like they're not reinventing the wheel. Like there's characters that you've seen before in horror movies, characters you've seen before in slashers. But you know, it's nice the fact that um I love that there are characters who are unsuspecting of what's going on, and
Yeah.
Amy's the only one, and so she's getting help from is it Trevor?
Yeah, Trevor. Trevor's the
Trevor.
alive one. Travis was the one who didn't make
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, and like, but no, well, I have so much to say about that, those two, because you know Travis and Amy. But yeah, what about you? You like the characters as well?
Yes, I do. I definitely get your apprehension with the two guys. Yeah, I think they were there to make a point and a comedic stance. I enjoyed them for what they were worth. The filmmate, like the producer and stuff behind the scene, said that Anthony Anderson's character and Eva Mendez's characters were originally a little smaller, but because of the behind the scenes, just how the actors were, they expanded the roles because they're like, people got to see this, like this sort of
Oh,
humor. And I do think that, yeah, Eva Mendes in particular has this sort of quality about her that I love that she's sort of like a bulldog when it comes to
mhm.
Amy, like friendly to Amy, but when anybody else is like giving her guffaw, she's like, "Brr, brr, brr," like I'm an attack. And I love that about her, especially when you do get to then see her vulnerability. Like, well, there's a killer here. She's not like, oh, I'm gonna fight. It's not like this sort of box character that like, well, no, I'll defend you, Amy. It's like we gotta run and run, and I enjoy that. I enjoy that it like again, it always walks that line of being a cartoon or something, and then they pull it back and they're like, no, we're gonna give you a solid movie. Jessica Caulfield, I think, is hilarious. If ever you get the special the Blu-ray, she has like a 20-minute
Oh,
interview on there that's just her talking about her career and how this was like her first real movie. And I think she does a fantastic job. Like the first time through, she is and it's one of those characters that could become super obnoxious super
right,
quickly. But
right.
she doesn't overdo it, and then I think she becomes like endearing, and you don't want her to die. You were hoping she was going to be in the movie longer, and I
Mhm.
think that it was the same thing with Valentine, where she almost had that sort of mirrored role, subtle differences, but in general, like characters you don't want to go so soon. Jessica Caulfield as Sandra in this, Lily in Valentine, and just yeah, overall Matthew Lawrence again. He sort of like holds the mirror up to Amy as the sort of like rich guy, but like calling her out and saying, hey, let's use what we got. And yes, I do want to again. I will put a pin a little longer and Loretta Devine because I do want to talk about Travis and Trevor, the sort of that dynamic because I think that the Matthew Davis who portrays both characters, he does have that sort of quality that walks the line of like possible romantic hero, possible homicidal maniac. Like he can be either one. Like there's moments where when you watch the first time, like when they're laying in bed together, he looks at her with a sort of sinister glint in his eye. But you can watch it the second time, knowing how everything turns out, and you're almost like, oh no, that may be a romantic glint in his eye,
Right.
and you can believe it on either direction. And I think that's probably a really difficult thing to pull off. But what did you wanted to say about? Because you said you want to talk about Travis, Trevor
Oh,
in general.
okay, so I'm already laughing. Okay, so when Travis was really down in the beginning of the movie about receiving a C minus, you know, he's on his front porch drinking. Amy comes and Amy has a crush on him, like a major crush. And it's like,
Right.
I think she had a chance with him. I think it's kind of messed up that he died and then she just moved on to the brother. But
Right.
okay. And that's what I mean. That's kind of questionable, Amy.
Yeah,
Like,
I agree though.
so basically, okay, it's the scene when Amy shows up and she, again, Travis is drinking, and for some reason, Amy, she's like, hey, I'm really sorry about this. She's trying to make him feel better, and then she's like, hey, I really hate to ask this, but you have a cinematographer I could use, and it's just like, girl, he is feeling horrible, but at the same time, I get it. The stakes are high. This is a one-time opportunity. She feels like she has a lot to prove, and everything like that to her family, to people who know who she is, who her father is. So, and she really wants to make this project happen. And Travis is really nice. He gives it to her. And to me, it didn't sit right with me because it was just kind of like, then she just ends it with, it's going to be okay. And it's just like, is it though? Is it going to be okay? It's going to be okay for you. Like,
Yeah.
he's not going to win. And I mean, I'm surprised that he didn't say F you or something, but obviously he wouldn't. So that was the first thing that I was just like, kind of giving her the side eye. Then the second thing was, again, we talked about this with the other brother. She sees Travis's twin brother, Trevor, so they look alike. It's literally, she thought it was Travis, and she doesn't care. It's like, okay, well, he died, so I guess I can have this one. And it's just like,
Yeah, for sure.
Why did you like him then, Amy? I mean, fine, if you only liked him for his looks, but it's just like, you don't want to wait a couple of months, maybe? No, she was already having fantasies of his cheeks. There was just crazy stuff. And then, again, like, she's really trying to make this happen. And is it Toby? There's a guy that comes in and he gets her attitude for like snatching his genre. Okay. Hear me out. I'm not trying to sound like I'm guarding the gate, okay? But in a way, I kind of understand Toby, just because it was just kind of like, all right, you're coming out of no, especially because how advanced they are, in school, and the stakes, again, they're high. So then here you are, he probably chose that genre because no one else was doing it. And yeah, you could stand out that way, but it's like, if there's two horror movies, you know what I mean? So it's like, I totally understand it, but no, Toby's horrible. He's a horrible person, but it was just the fact that he was like really telling her off. I mean, like really telling her off, Justin. And the only thing that she got offended by was the fact that he called her a little girl. Like, she was just like that music started and her eyes was just like, and it was just like, really? That's the only thing that made you upset? Like, I don't know. So maybe that's just small. But again, those were just those little things that stuck with me, and it just kind of made me questionable towards our good little Amy.
Well, let me ask you, because I feel like what you were discussing with Toby is something I did want to ask you specifically, which is, Amy throughout the film, she's a woman filmmaker, and clearly this is like a dominated by a male, very like all these men. And I have to wonder, what do you think about that in terms of your experience as a filmmaker, but also with the fact of like, do you think Toby would have been so ready to like pounce on her and put her down so quickly if she had been a man? And I don't mean this like so much in like a feminist way, hard push, but in general, I do think that, it's because she was a woman that he was willing to come in and like sort of stuff. And I just was curious if you being a filmmaker, do you think a realistic experience?
I didn't even think about that, but you know what? You are absolutely right. I do feel like if she were a man, and he probably would have never approached her about it. He probably just would have been huffing and puffing, but he would have never said anything.
Especially
and then also
as the horror genre.
Right, especially. And then also
like a woman in the horror genre. Sorry, I'm interrupting.
No, you're fine. And then also just the fact with her, again, being timid Amy, she doesn't really say much, type of thing. He felt that he could say that kind of stuff. But for sure, it felt very much realistic. I kind of wish, though, that she would have stood her ground. You know what I mean? Where it's just kind of like, okay, well, this is what I'm doing. I'm sorry. Does horror have your name on it? You know what I mean? Like, maybe even being more like Vanessa. He would never do that with Vanessa, obviously. So it was just kind of like that. So again, but see, now you're having me change my mind on about what I just said, where it's just kind of like, I got what he was saying, but you're absolutely right, because it is a male dominant, industry.
Yeah.
And I've seen that happen before many, many times.
Well, the fact too that she helped out with him.
Right.
And he knows that because she's a woman, he might be able to get away with like, oh, I'm not helping you now, and you should know this because you went into my genre. Like, I definitely would. I get his position to a certain percentage of like, hey, this has been my thing. I feel like you could have a reaction, but don't go off on this girl. She has every right to be doing it. she's a filmmaker, you know, and
Yeah.
my like she wants to make this, she can. But I just didn't like the way that he talked to her about it specifically. I
Mhm.
felt like it was so dismissive, and I don't know, I was just curious, like, if that was your experience at all, like just
That
being dismissed.
yes. Yes, I have I have experienced that before. So one thing too is knowing how to stand your ground, or knowing where it's just like, because sometimes you do have to be professional, and you can be professional and stuff like that, but one thing I can say about Amy is that she still kept on going. She didn't
Yeah.
let that like bother her, so I understood even why she did have to ask Travis, even though it was during the worst time ever, but I get it,
Or
you
no,
know.
what you said before is not invalidated by any means, because
Right.
I do agree. But
Yeah,
I
no.
thought these little moments too were interesting to, like, you know,
Right.
observe from your POV.
And no, and definitely, it's just I mean, when would be a right time? But I mean, not when he's drinking, you know, you know what I mean. So it's just that was yeah. But no, like no, I just like you just kind of put things in a whole different perspective for me, you know, even with him. And like I said, Toby, I'm not on Toby's side at all,
For
but
sure.
it was just yeah, I kind of in a way, I guess I meant it in a way where it was just like, all right, you worked on my movie, were you inspired to do this, are you going to copy off of me? And not saying that all horror is the same, but and we don't even know this, I just thought in my mind, well, maybe he picked that because no one else was doing it, because I don't think Trevor's or no, Travis, his movie, I'm pretty sure it wasn't a horror, it didn't look like a one from what we saw, you know.
Right.
So but yeah, good point though.
I just thought, yeah, I thought, well, because I feel like you, being a filmmaker, probably had to deal with both sides, Toby's side
Besides,
and Amy's side. So
yeah.
it makes sense that you would have sort of perspective on both.
Mhm.
Whereas this time through, because I know you, I sort of I thought of Amy this time as a filmmaker, thinking about you a little bit in there too. Like, oh, I wonder if that's something you've had to
Mhm.
kind of deal with.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so I was curious about
Unfortunately,
that.
unfortunately, that's kind of what comes with it. You know, sometimes don't get me wrong. I've met some
Sure.
really awesome people, men and women. You know, but sometimes you meet those people where it's just like that's a perfect word for it. They're very dismissive,
Yeah.
and you know, not trying to sound cheesy or like a fortune cookie, but you know, that kind of with that type of behavior, it's like, okay, again, sounds a little bit cheesy, but you have to know yourself. So knowing, okay, well, this is what I want to do, and I wanted to do it even before you came along, or you know what I mean. You're not doing it for anyone else. You're doing it because you actually love it. So I think the fact that with Amy's character, I love the fact that after that thing happened with Toby, it was what it was, and she kept on going.
Yeah.
And even though she didn't have like a cinematographer, she didn't have that person, she was gonna film it herself. And sometimes that happens, but then luckily, you know, Simon came in and he saved the day.
Which are, you know, really comes down to Amy and her resources. You know, resources
Mhm.
come in many forms. It just goes to show how resourceful she was. She had like there was somebody networking, whatever, that she was able to do that. I do want to ask you too about just the suspense of the movie. I think it's balanced well with the comedy, but like I really do think it's like a fun ride, suspense. I love that there's like sort of like three main chase sequences. There's the whole kidney, that whole sequence, which by the way was initially not in the script and it wasn't filmed. When they did it like a test screening, they're like, something's missing. And they decided to like get the original screenwriter for the original, Silvio Horto, who went on to do like Ugly Betty and such. He rewrote the scene, but I feel like that really added so much to
Mhm.
it, because again, it makes you, again, right off the bat, you have at this time Travis and Toby as potential suspects in that scene. You have this young woman who is herself engaged in an urban legend, you
Mhm.
know, the whole kidney thing. But then the sequence is very Dario Argento-esque. But overall, just what do you think about, like, because I think that's probably my favorite sequence from the movie, in terms of the horror suspense, as well as Amy's the whole sequence where she's in the studio, she kind of, the glass is separating them, hiding, run. I love all of it. I just think that they're really effective. But what do you think overall of like the suspense sequences, and do you think it's a suspenseful movie?
I do, and I wanted us to talk about that bath kidney scene because that's actually one of my favorite scenes. You know,
Yeah.
I just found that completely terrifying. Like, you hear about that all the time. A woman wakes up in a
Yeah.
bathtub full of ice, and then we actually were able to see it. And like, that bathroom looked filthy, you know, and she's trying so hard. And every single time, and I think we talked about this, when we know that she's going to slip, you know,
Right.
coming out of, but
Right.
you're just like, no, you know,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
just so upset about it. And it's like, what could you do? Because it's just like, in that type of thing, you know, sometimes when you're watching a movie, when you're watching a horror, oh, run, oh my God, how could you know? And it's just like, okay, in that case, what could she do?
She did everything she could. Yes,
Yeah.
agreed, 100%. Yes.
Right. The only thing I will say that I was just kind of like, okay, you are so tiny. You can get through that window. When she was
Sure,
trying to
for
go through the
sure.
window,
For sure.
but I get it. She probably was numb, and you know,
Pain. I mean, they say that's one of the most painful surgeries, the fact that she was running around. So I'll give her a little credit, but yeah, I think she did pretty much everything she could do.
and it always just makes me cringe
Yeah.
because, you know, like, you just kind of reach down to where, you know, your kidneys are, just kind of, you know, that pain. And I also love the scene when she's running under the sewer,
Yeah.
and you know, Reese finds her and stuff like that,
Yeah.
because as the viewer, you're thinking like, okay, yeah, she better get out of there, there's someone right behind her. But yeah, I definitely do feel like it is the type of movie, the type of slasher that has you on the edge of your seat. And again, that's what makes you just keep on coming back. And I know personally, I like, we talked about this previously, I have friends who do not like horror movies, but I put this on and they zipped it because they were so into it.
For
You
sure. And yeah, I think it's like there's just such great moments. In fact, one, I think that kidney scene is the best out of all the urban legend movies.
know?
And I love that, you know, with the whole Amy sequence. Another example of how this movie walks the line of a sort of almost unbelievable theme or idea, but makes it work because the whole time the killer does have to keep letting her go, but you never really in any obvious way suspect that because watching horror movies, you sometimes see like, okay, the killer's just walking. You kind of accept that he's a walker instead of a runner, or you accept certain tropes of the horror genre that you could believe she could escape all those times, but you never once suspect like, oh, he's letting her go. But when you watch it again, you are like, he's letting her go. I don't know. It's just a fun little twist. But yes, let's talk about Loretta Devine. I want to make sure.
Yes.
Um, I remember when Dreamgirls came out, the film adaptation. And when, I am a big musical guy too. And so I remember I had to immediately go on YouTube and look up like original Broadway cast recording. Can I see any videos from it? And Jennifer Holliday, I believe, on the Tony Awards, her rendition of And I'm Telling You
Hmm.
came up, but off to the side was this really tall, pretty skinny girl who had a little bit of a musical song part of it in the intro. And I'm like, oh, that's Reese from Urban Legends. I'm like, that's
Oh
Reese. That's
yeah.
Loretta Devine. And because she was in the original Broadway cast and she could sing, she was great. But and then I remember I had seen Waiting to Exhale years before, but then I watched it again in my like late 20s and I was like, that's Reese from Urban Legends. It always comes back. And I just get so excited because I think she does a fantastic job in the original. She does. But it's definitely, and it has its comedic moments, but it's definitely more of like a straightforward character. Whereas in this one, she transcends into like, I don't know, what I think of as a star. Like she is funny, dramatic, suspicious, playful, all these like elements.
Yeah.
Like my favorite hands down moment, and I remember my roommate Danielle and I, when we saw this as late teens, we were in the theater, and when she gets punched and she turns back and she does the whole mother effer, it's like the mother effer. We were like, yeah, just cheering in it. So I can't emphasize enough how amazing just Loretta Devine is. Like she brings the joy of it, and horror movies, especially of the Scream generation, really did need that sort of comedic element.
Yes.
But
True.
it's her performance. It's the way like when she talks about coffee and you're sort of like, ooh, I like it. And the fact she's like just in there dancing and she sparkles. I don't know.
Does. That's
I
the
think she
perfect
is what
word.
makes Urban Legend both the original and final cut, as well as Rebecca Gayheart in terms
Hmm.
of like the sort of ending bit, which I guess we should probably talk about too. But Loretta Devine, you make this movie, and I just love her in it. But anyway, what do you think? What do you think? What do you tell me about your experience?
That is the perfect word. She just sparkles. And I
Yeah.
feel like every movie that she's in, she sparkles.
Yes.
Crazy thing, I remember when I remember watching Urban Legends first, even though this movie came out first, Waiting to Excel. And why was I watching that? I don't know. Okay. And she's in it. And I'm like, Reese, hey girl,
Yes.
you know. So, but even with that, she sparkles. You know what I mean? And she's like this divorced woman, and she's trying to meet this, get together with her neighbor, and her son is a little bit out of control, but she has friends, and I don't know. But yeah, out of all the friends, I just feel like she just kind of sparkles, you know? And then even when she's in the movie Spell. Have you seen Spell yet?
No, I haven't
It
seen
came out.
Spell.
Okay, Spell. People have been trying to put down Spell, but I love Spell, and I have a feeling that you'll love it too. Because not only just because Loreta Devine is in it, but I feel like once again she's just showing that she's a star. Her performance,
Well, I'm gonna check it
she
out then.
she plays like this sweet old lady, or you think that she is, they kind of make her look a little bit older and stuff. I mean, but again, she still sparkles. Like there's just something about her. And I agree with you. I feel like when I think about it, with the movies, I think that she's probably one of the main reasons why I enjoy both of them. And it's crazy because she's not even like a major character, but she's likable, and she just seems like a real character, and you kind of feel safe with her, And then you feel bummed even in the sequel because it's like, because you were wondering what happened to her, and that's crazy that they just swept it under the rug, and then she had to find like a new job, you know? And so, I don't know, just to see her back on top, at the end of the movie, she really is. She's just a wonderful human. I
It's
just
so
love
true.
her.
But right, but kudos to the producers of the second film for understanding what a component she was like to
Yes.
the first film to make this film work.
Mm-hmm.
And then yes, let's also, the very end of the movie, you've got this sort of fun Twilight Zone Alfred Hitchcock Presents ending where you sort of bridge this new killer obsessed with urban legends with
Mm-hmm.
Brenda, Rebecca Gayheart, whose life became shaped by urban legends.
Right.
And the sort of twist to it, because that was sort of the wink wink nudge at the end of the original, was that sort of she still is in college, so you could believe she went on through a nursing program, became a nurse. And I love that the movie ends on that note. It's different than other, slashers of the time or horror movies in general. You sort of had like the original had that, that wasn't as in the original, it wasn't as original to
Mm-hmm.
have a sort of, at the end, like, let me tell you how it really is. That
Right.
was almost sort of like it's great and it works, but it's almost like a thing that you're sort of familiar with. In this one, in Urban Legends Final Cut, it is almost original. It is sort of like that's an interesting. You've got two serial killers together. It almost leaves you with a delightful chill. Like you
Mm-hmm.
still get the chill, but it's delightful. So, what did you
Right.
think about the overall ending, like the final credits ending?
I love that
Yeah,
because kind of like what you said, it was unsuspected. Like, who
yeah,
would ever think that that would happen? But at the same time, even though it's like, oh my gosh, we get to see Brenda Bates again, but it's just kind of like, okay, well, this is where the professor ended up. And then on top of that, there's like something dark but comedic about it. Because, like you said, she went on to nursing school. She moved on. She moved right along. And, even though it's like I didn't care for the character Natalie, she probably never recovered from that
right.
whole
Oh, I'm
experience. But
I'm sure.
yeah, but then you have Brenda Bates just being a normal person,
Right.
in
Well,
nursing
she wasn't
school.
cathartic of murdering all these kids, so she kind of got out her issues. Where Natalie probably is like, based on Natalie's character, not coping well. Brenda's kind of like,
Yeah,
oh, you know what? I got 9 out of 10 of them. I'm cool.
she was fine, and so now she's trying to help people.
I've never thought of it that way. That's so funny, Zena. I'm so glad you said it like that. I've never thought of that, and I'm like, that works.
It does, and it sucks because it's just like her friends from college were killed, and
Yeah,
you know what I mean. So it's just like when she thinks back on college, it's not going to be a good time.
those were not the golden years. Those weren't the good old years.
actually thought that we were going to see, you know, Natalie again. That's why I was
Yeah.
just saying, like, I really wasn't looking forward to it. Like, I'm surprised that they didn't have it be like about Natalie again and
Sure.
her up against Brenda. But I'm kind of glad that we didn't go that, well, that they didn't go that route. You know what I mean? They offers us something different. And again, like you said, there are some, you know, comedic chops throughout this movie, and then that little surprise ending is exactly that. Because again, it's dark, it is surprising, but it's kind of funny. It was just kind of like,
Yeah.
and then the music, you know, it's just like, oh, because
Yeah,
that's
it's
what
sort of
happens.
Alfred Hitchcock theme.
Very
Well,
awesome.
Rebecca Gayheart did want to was disappointed. She's in one of the interviews and she says she was disappointed. She wishes like they had gone with more of a Brenda or having, you know, getting to see some people from the original back. I think I would have enjoyed that movie too,
Yeah,
but ultimately I am glad that this is the movie we got. It really does show you that it's possible to have a sequel that changes the setting, characters, etc., and yet you still can enjoy it 100%.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well said.
Well, thanks again, everybody, for joining us for another episode of the Rabid Dog's House. What is your favorite urban legend? What is your favorite film of the urban legend series? You got one, Final Cut, or Bloody Mary? Thanks again, Zena Dixon, the Real Queen of Horror, for joining us tonight. You can find Zena over at realqueenofhorror.com, Wicked Horror, or at YouTube under her Real Queen of Horror moniker. And I'm Justin Steele. You can find me over at Wicked Horror, Horror One Pop Culture, or on Twitter at Wicked Horror Justin. Thank you, Zena, for talking about Urban Legends Final Cut with me tonight. I had a blast.
Thank you so much. I had the best time.
Good. We'll see you all soon.